Again, Greg Lecker, uh, the Arctic Circling Back, and in this program, I will develop a new body of work based on my field studies in Svalbard, Norway in 2022. And um, in that project, I traveled along with a number of other artists in Svalbard, Norway. It's about halfway between the North Pole and the mainland of Svalbard. So that was interesting. I had not been that far north before. Just for reference, we here in Minnesota, we're at 45 degrees north latitude, so that's just about halfway between the North Pole and the um, equator. So where we were 78 to 80 degrees north latitude. I'm doing a little transferring here, just trying not to bore you with all of that. So you're not seeing the document camera just yet. But we traveled for 2 weeks on board the Antigua, a tall three-masted ship traveling. Uh, most days we're sailing through the night or early morning. Um, Captain and the crew were eating breakfast while after we had landed. So they were moving as much as possible, moving us around so that we could have fun and be accommodating. So there were 26 artists, crew of 11, so pretty sparse voyage. And like I said, we would travel along the west coast of Svalbard, Norway. Svalbard is an archipelago of islands. Spitsbergen is the biggest, and that's the one that we were mostly navigating around. And each day after breakfast, we made a landing via Zodiacs after our guides had scouted out to ensure that the location that we were at was free of polar bears because it's not something that we want to run into. And we needed to stay within a perimeter according to them. We could not just go off on our own. We stayed inside the perimeter to be safe, and because that's the regulations of the island to make sure that um, everyone's safe, including the polar bears. Uh, while it's against the law to shoot the polar bears, that is ultimately what might have to happen if one encounters a polar bear. First, the idea would be avoid the polar bear, scout it out from a distance. Don't land if you see one. Pick another landing spot. There are more polar bears than people on the islands, so the chances of seeing one are strong. Certainly, the people that live in Longyearbyen, the main town, one of the northernmost settlements in the world, they see polar bears, and they bad things have happened. So the idea is we want to remain safe. We want to um, let them live, let us live, not be hurt, whatnot. So on our voyage within the various artists, we had a dancer, photographers, a lot of sound recording folks. When I say a dancer, she danced no music, but recorded herself. And then following the voyage, friends of hers put together the compositions, which are incredible. So one can move to protect is her website. If you Google that in Arctic, I'm sure that you will get to the videos and whatnot that are on her website. So that is something that one can see. So yes, I'm going to now transfer to the document camera so that you can see a little bit more of what I'm doing. and I'm going to just share a little bit of what block printing is about and what it is, why I do it. So I had started doing it um, for a couple reasons. One was that I wanted to be able to make prints of my work. And so you're seeing here, I'm transferring an image to a block that I will be carving with speedball um, tools here. Um, but it started off with my Bridging Troubled Waters project of 2024, I guess. It seems like it's a long time ago now, but or it seems like it was just yesterday, but it was some time ago. Um, and with that, I had endeavored to paint Bassett Creek, which is the creek in my neighborhood. And with that, I was just going to paint some different areas. This one, you can see a little bit of the bridge. This is going to be, it's not just an abstract. There was a method to the madness. I think it's supposed to be oil sheen or whatnot. But shortly after I had started the project, the chevron deference case was reversed. And so I got the idea of using the Chevron logo, printing that potentially, and then painting on top of it. The beauty of doing this water soluble ink that I'm using comes in these tubes, kind of like paint tubes, but it's water soluble. You can reconstitute it, frankly, when it's on the glass plate. I'll be showing the glass plate printing when we get to that part. But one can carve on this soft block. That's very easy to carve, guess speed carving almost in a way, but everything's reversed. So that's the kind of weird item that one needs to keep in mind is that it is not what one thinks of. Like I said, everything's reversed. So you need to plan a lot of planning in terms of especially if there are words. Um, so that was the first carving that I had done, and um, worked out okay, I think. In terms of again, the water soluble nature of the ink meant that I could add watercolor on top of it. I could reconstitute the water color ink by adding water to it, scratching it, whatnot. So that worked out well. So that was my first foray into block printing. Then my next foray was to print um, the neighbor's uh, painting, which I've painted before, um, both a small plein air version, but then on our gallery card, you can see the large painting. So this is 4 feet by 3 feet tall. It's not small. So there's been a lot of demand, interest to that. And so um, I tried a block print. So this is a multicolored block print available at the Gallery Imagine number 183 Northrop King building. But to do this, how does one do this? Well, I'll show you. So one starts off with several blocks. This was the background of the house, the kind of yellowish whitish. This was both the sky, the light sky with the gradations, a darker bluish gray for the shadows, and then a kind of medium bluish gray. And then finally, the house was carved in, this was linoleum block. It's easier to get details with linoleum block than it is with the softer carving element. And it really lent itself well because of all the straight lines that were going on. And so that is what I did. And so for today's class, we're going to be printing two blocks, primarily one, but and I will show that at the end, but I am going to be showing some carving. So the I've just transferred this this image was a combination, a collage of a painting that I had done and some glacial scratches that I had rubbed. Um, so the speedball printing, it's all in this tool. So I've already reversed the image to what is there. Whoops. That is not what I wanted to do. That is the inside where the blades go, not. So the blades are held into that once they're placed, but the blades are in the back of this. So there's a couple different blades. There are detailed blades. There are gouging tools for fast working. I've not really used this tool before, so I'm probably not going to be doing that today, but I will be using these several. I'm going to put the rest in here so I don't lose those. I'm going to keep them inside this little keeper so they don't go away. And I'm going to do hopefully some fast carving um, for um, with the carving, one is removing anything that one does not want to have remaining or to have printed. So it's a negative of what normally we're painting what we see, and here we're not. We are so it's a little tricky, but you insert the blade in between some metal parts. It's very sharp, so you don't want to be cutting yourself on that. The other blades I'm going to put back on there, and I'm going to use a straight edge for the carving because it is. Right, we're going to use this. Man, that's a little bit too deep, so we're going to use this, I guess, to carve out the areas that I don't want. Got some little scraps from the other project. And I'm going to rotate with this is a bench, I'll say a bench hook. There's a metal version, and this is a larger wooden one, particle board, whatnot. But it seems to work well, especially when one is carving out bigger block. So, and it's going to be a little messy. We're going to generate a lot of pieces. Block printing can be done in wood block printing, in linoleum block, in the soft types of forms, which is what I'm doing. Um, wood block, Albrecht Dürer, centuries ago, was a master carver of wood blocks. The famous series of the Horsemen of the Apocalypse and various other things. He really was. Social media at that time was getting your work out in terms of prints far and wide to people. And so that's how he got his work out, got his name known very well. Um, yeah, he was a master of the social media of the day. So I'm carving down the sky because I've already printed the sky on this. So I'm going to just show you. This is this is the collage of the painting image and the glacial scratches that I had done on crayon on paper. So I've just collaged these via the computer. What I've done then is transferred that, interpreted that into block ink printing. And I did this with a series of stencils over the last couple of days. As I started doing preparation for this class, I realized that it is not possible to do as much to do the entire thing uh, in the class. Of course not. Um, so for, excuse me, what I had, these were actually more like stencils. So I had cut stencils using this image in black and white, just removing different parts of it so I could roller on parts of the sky or parts of the gray matter in the mountains or in the granite that we had scratched off. And so I have a number of these things that are already printed, and I'm today I'm going to be printing on just a white piece of paper because I want to make sure that I'm happy with it before I start printing. I've got six of these. Block printing is usually a limited edition. Um, Part of it is the nature of the beast. Um, Sometimes the techniques blocks don't last forever in terms of the printing. One loses um, detail in the printing, and certainly in the case of doing the paper stencils, cardboard could have been done, I guess, instead. But again, it would have been difficult to transfer and to get the ink to um, to go through the cardboard because of the thickness of it. Normally, like I said, block printing, you're normally inking the top surface of um, the area. And just to keep in mind what we're doing, I'm carving out the negative space. So I do not want to print black or dark blue, gray onto my sky that I've already printed. I want to keep that as a void. So I'm going to be carving the sky away. And later on in the presentation, in the demonstration, I'm going to show you another technique that I did um, where I build up the block instead of removing it. The reason that I did that, it's just faster instead of carving so much away. And so I did that with the house, um, and it works well with less detail. It does not work well with the amount of detail that I will be carving into this block. And it is possible to carve too deeply into these blocks, like I almost just did. I almost carved through the block. Um, but um, I am trying to, like I said, remove the sky that I don't want to have printed. Part of it is I could also just not ink that part of the sky. It's far more difficult to do that if it's not carved away. But once it is carved away, then it's something that one can easily mask out one versus the other. But when I mentioned about the limited edition, so the blocks, yes, the wood, wood is going to last some time, but some of the detail with each printing sometimes, and with the cleaning of the block that's going on, which you'll maybe not see because I'll be doing that behind the scenes. But with the cleaning, each time you're cleaning, you're removing the ink, but you're sometimes also removing some pieces of the block might be going away too. Now, wood is probably more durable than this rubbery material. The linoleum block uh, is somewhere in between wood and this. It's a lot easier to carve, but the linoleum block can dry out in time. Um, and so I'm just starting to get into the mountain side here. Svalbard's very mountainous, um, and a lot of glaciers. So this was one of the first glaciers that we had stopped at, one of our first landings, frankly. Um, and I did not realize, luckily I was prepared and grabbed a lot of my gear. I had my painting gear, but I also had plastic and paper and crayons. And you're wondering, like, what's with all that? Well, I had done a little research before and had the idea to do some rubbings of the rock and whatnot. I wasn't completely sure what I was going to run into there, but turned out that this very first day that we had landed, the Dahlgren Glacier is one of the more active. And the landing spot that we had landed at, the outcropping of granite, enough for, I mean, certainly more than enough room for 100 people to hang out in terms of the land. But there were like 20 of us, 20, 25 of us, doing all different types of things, photographer doing his work, dancer, dancing and videotaping herself, and there I'm painting. But then because we ended up going back there in the afternoon after lunch, then I was happy I was able to bring my gear to do my scratches, to record the scratches that I'd seen. Now, the land that we were on, believe it or not, this glacier that one can see here, which we did not go just very close. The whole time that we were there, it was calving, um, and so it was um, calving means that different parts of it are falling off into the water, and so those elements can be very large and certainly would sink. Even the waves would overtop the Zodiac. Um, so some folks did go out. Certainly the pilots of the Zodiac did not take them just too close, but I was busy. I was preoccupied with getting my glacial scratches. So to do that, um, or as I was saying, that land that we were standing on, this granite outcropping, believe it or not, as recently as 20 or 2009, we were there in 2022, recall, that glacier had been covering the land that we were on. So that is how quickly glaciers are receding, how quickly glaciers can recede, and how quickly glaciers are receding in portions of Svalbard. Now, every glacier is a bit different in terms of the speed at which it's receding. It was fascinating to me to imagine that that would be evidence of, or recording of, at least um, what the glaciers have done. So the glaciers, tons and tons of ice with rocks and dust and dirt and sand underneath it. And as it recedes, meaning that it's advancing or receding, so as the ice builds up, the weight on, or the area on which it's sitting, can no longer hold itself, so it's sloping forward, just as it would slope off a roof, whatnot. So the ice pressure um, causes some friction. So there's some heating up of the underside uh, of the ice, and so it can slide somewhat. Um, and so doing that on with all that mass of rock and whatnot, then is able to gouge and scratch even granite. And so there's records of what is going on. And also now I've removed removed the sky, and now I'm going to be looking at um, and rendering this. I'm still going to be taking out some portions of this because I don't want to have the um, this area printing, but I'm going to be looking at this area of the sloping of the mountain, and I'm going to be rendering that with the direction of the scratches. So unlike the house, yes, the house still, I was purposeful in terms of where I was um, making the scratches so that it would render as the um, and one can vary the depth of the scratches by the pressure one has. So one doesn't always have to just change out the tool, which I'm not going to do so much here because in the interest of time. Um, but I do want to be able to show some of the texture of the mountains. I had already printed, useful to remember if I see here. Now, again, remember this is going to be reverse. So that's the confusing part. This is that part, but it's reversed. And then this is going to be some of the lower parts. So we'll find out if it works or not once I spend more time on it. But like I said, I do want to spend a little bit more time on this. I'm not going to be able to carve been carving for maybe 10 minutes or so, besides talking and whatnot. But to do this whole block is going to be probably more like definitely more than an hour, certainly. Um, and when I ink this block, I'm going to vary the the color of the ink slightly. From painting, I know that um, the distant elements, the shadows are more subtle than the areas closer to you in terms of the shadows. And frankly, the fissures in the granite were the darkest. And so I will endeavor to make those, and maybe I will try to carve some of those out so that you can see some of the variation um, in the different colors here and there. Because some of these I'll probably print with a blue black. Um, and then there's the glacier here, and I know that the glacier I had printed that before, so I'm definitely going to want to take away most of that area. But I want to leave a little bit of the shadow, uh, the base of the glacier as it was going into the water. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of, one can take quite a lot of time to do a really detailed carving, and so I will want to do that, but I wanted to at least show you a fair amount of what of my process going on. And so why am I exploring different mediums? I'm a painter. Why not just paint? Um, get better with more painting? Well, the reason is that I tend to be fairly detailed in my painting. Maybe gets a little bit too busy at times. Maybe it's from my education as an engineer. It's just the way that I'm built. Um, and that's not always the best thing for conveying feeling or emotion or just even the scene that one sees. It's not just a question of time because certainly there are tricks in terms of painting. A lot of times it looks like there's a lot more painted because of brushwork and palette knife. And hopefully you're seeing all of this. I want to make sure that I'm keeping that in the field, but that you're seeing the whole thing of like the block that's being carved, the reference image, and then the what we're going to be printing onto in a few days. Today I'm going to print just like I said on white paper because it's going to take time for me to get the block to the point where I'm happy with it. I don't want to give up some of these images. You will see another block that I've carved mostly already. Actually, it's one that I've built up um, so that you'll see that. And you will still see this printed, so fear not. I'm not going to keep it all away from you. Um, it just, I originally had thought about just doing the other block, which was the based on the collage, but then I knew that I wanted to play around with this someday. I just thought that I was going to be doing it more as a collage, but as I went along, I realized uh, that I would try this block printing and see how it turned out. And I'm happy with the various steps so far that I've done, and I've taken some pictures here and there uh, of the printing of the various prints. Um, and I will get some. I'm realizing I do want to get some still images of this carving for people, social media postings, etc. So I'm just going to be doing a little bit of that here and there. And this is recorded, so it certainly will be posted. I had posted uh, some of the recordings to my website. I have had a YouTube channel. I haven't not done much lately, but I've been adding more and more lately. So the collage and the scratch board now are on there. You can from the YouTube, if you Google Greg Lecker, um, it's on my website too. I believe there's a link, so you would be able to find your way to the to that site. Um, but going back in terms of the why am I trying these different mediums? Well, in the collage, it's forces one to connect shapes to reduce the number of shapes that one uses because there's just not that many, not an infinite number of cut paper that one would do. Um, with the scratch board, working with black and white, that's a different um, idea in itself. Certainly, uh, learning to connect shapes, it's very Zen-like in the act of doing it. Um, I find it very relaxing. It's a lot cleaner than this block printing. The block printing, it's not overly um, hard to clean up. It's water soluble, so you can clean up with soap and water, but it's still ink, and so you don't want to get ink all over clothing and whatnot. So I'm removing some of the areas where the glacier front, which has been printed in blue, the blue is over here. Um, so you'll just have to stay tuned to my social media postings, and eventually in the final video that I produce, there will be um, difficult because one's doing it, I guess not doing it backwards. It is forward, but still, uh, I've not transferred the colors onto the block. It's just black and white. So try and remember that um, and trying some different things with texture. Um, so yeah, the different mediums helps me understand maybe even the notion of the scratching maybe will help me remember some of the things that I saw in terms of um, the different experiences, the sounds, the movement of the ice. Um, Painting is not what one doesn't normally think of paint as necessarily a violent act or an act of a lot of motion. Yes, the painter's motion, and this isn't violent, but I am um, abrading the surface, just like the glaciers abraded the surface of the granite. And so there's scratches here as well as scratches in the granite. So I think that has there's some story to be told about that. Uh, So, um, and maybe I'll just outline some areas here. I won't remove everything around it, but at least that way when I print it, you'll see the white outline around the darker area, and that will represent it's almost like drawing instead of painting, instead of filling in the areas. So then at least the print. Sometimes an artist will uh, lay a piece of tracing paper and then transfer the marks onto the tracing paper. with by rubbing it, and that will pick up the lines, and that can help guide one in terms of are the lines deep enough or not. I'm fairly certain with my inking ability now that I'm getting better at that. I do want to spend a little bit more time on the on some of the glacial scratches so you can see those come through. So I'm going to probably stop a little bit of this shortly here. Just scroll down to the scratches. Um, so if I want these blacks to come to read out, then I'm going to want um, to remove the areas in between. Now I'm using the direction of these glacial scratches literally in terms of the um, some of the lines that I'm doing. And I don't want to go right through the lines, the deeper lines. So that's going to take um, some concentration. Again, something that I did not want to spend the hours here in the video that no one wants to watch that. Um, but at least get some of this. Now I'm going to be carving out some, again, negative spaces, so little squares here and there in between where the scratches will be. And we'll see how good my rendering comes out. Now, fortunately, none of this is not a portrait, um, not an exact representation of where those scratches were. So if no one's going to know if it's a three-legged scratch instead of a two-legged scratch, it's not a person that we're carving here. Um, because you're not just carving it would be very easy to just carve those areas out. But then that would print as um, light, and I could print that onto, say, a black piece of paper, and that would be one idea. And I had thought about doing that. I might do that with some of the recordings of the scratches that I had made, just because it's quicker to carve out, and also pretending I'm a glacier in terms of carving out um, the scratches. And there's a lot of parallels to what I had seen in terms of the scratches and the carving that I'm doing here, in that just as one carves into like a brittle material, some different pieces, chunks of the material might come out. Just like that, there would be portions of the granite, maybe there's some weathering going on as well, but where especially when the scratches were going in two different directions, not sure exactly how that all, somewhat probably the rocks moving a little bit underneath. Um, but chunks of the granite then would fall off. And so it's a little bit more difficult. But when I did the scratches, I'm going to spend some time. So we got about 15 minutes left. I want to do some printing so you can see that's some of the fun aspects of what we do. To spend a little bit of time rubbing. Now, I'm probably going to have to transfer some of these marks again onto the paper, onto the material after I print, because once I print and clean it, um, I'm going to lose some of these areas. That doesn't work so much, but some sort of a straight edge would be able to remove some of these quicker than what I can do. But anyhow, we're going to play with that. That's not going to be an exact replica of what we're doing. But one of the things I wanted to show you was, well, certainly the glass printing, or the printing on the glass, and the and some of the other printing that I have going on. So first, we'll get some paper here, and I've been doing work on watercolor paper. I've been playing around with a lot of watercolor. Here's just the image again to see what we're going to be trying to print. But these were some things that I had done previously earlier in my series of work with regards to the Arctic circling back, which was oil painting on onto watercolor paper, which is not normally what one does, but it worked okay because, well, I didn't have brushes. I had palette knife, had canvas, so I was faking a little bit of what I'd normally be doing. I'm getting some of the colors out. We got some blue, we got some black. I have a new color that's called Bluestone, which is a little bit tough. That's a smaller tube of that. But the Bluestone, really, you have to really read. Yes, it's a lighter gray than the Brayers that one uses are these elements. And there's a couple different sizes that work out well. Here's a bluer. Just trying to get a little bit of work together here. So yeah, we're going to be printing onto, like I said, white watercolor paper. We're using the glass over here. And I just want to test out some of this, see how it's going. You're going to see it with me. So why printing on watercolor paper instead of printing paper? I did the house neighbors. I did that in onto, this is more smoother paper, not watercolor paper, but I did watercolor paper on. Watercolor paper has a pebbled and a smooth surface, and I've been kind of happy with how it's worked, and so I'm just going to try that. So we're going to set that up, get that set up. We're going to pull down a little bit from the top. And you'll see what happens. We don't actually press it into here. We press the paper into the block, which is odd, very odd to me. It was not something that made sense to me when I started the block printing process. But I'm going to be doing a mix of the different grays here a little bit. You're seeing, I'm going to try to have it as much as possible in the view while keeping, just try to slide this over a little bit while not hurting the glass. So, okay, so we're going to get that going here. We do want to get a little bit of white set up here as well. So we got some of the black. This is one of the things that sometimes happens, is that you're not careful when you're pressing too hard. The material squirts out the bottom of the tube instead of the front. It's a little thick material, which is what happened to this white. months ago when I was printing. Which is why it's wrapped in plastic, which is why we have already made. So this is the black coming out of the. This does not happen with oil paint. Oil paint that the sealing just seems to work better with regards to the. Here's the blue stone, kind of bluish gray. And then I'm going to mix a little bit of the blue. And I'm going to be a little bit more careful, pressing from the bottom up instead of in such a hurry. Most of this white is already gone. It probably sets up a little bit on terms of the bottom, but that still is tacky. So it's not like it, because it's water soluble, it's not like oil paint, how oil paint will seal itself up because the outside of it will harden and be very plastic-like. That is not the way that, it's not the way that this works. And I'm going to want a little bit more blue because you're going to see another, and actually I want it to be a little bluish violet that you're going to be seeing. I'm not going to mix too much of that yet, but I'll try to stay clean here so we don't get ink all over the place. 10 minutes left. We're going to ink this, and we're going to ink another block too. So you're in for a surprise. So we're going to use the blue. Now it's kind of sticky and tacky, and I'm going to slide this onto the pen without hurting the glass. I don't want to risk snapping that glass. It's a learned process in terms of how much ink. It's not a lot of ink that one is getting onto the block. Multiple layers are usually better rather than just one layer, but having worked with the neighbors, I realized, because if you do too much, guess what? The ink fills in those cracks and you lose your detail. So you don't want to do that. I'm just going to jump it around a little bit just to manage the small amount of excess that I have going on. One can spend a lot of time inking up the brayer, more time than what I'm doing here. And you'll see I'm varying the color slightly. I want to look at the print here and see where some of the darker areas were of this, and I'm going to use. I'm sure that this is not what every block printer uses. And look, I've got some of that onto there, which I did not want to do. But I wanted to get a little bit of variation in terms of my. Now, a person could spend more time. I'm gonna lose some of those scratches, but we're just gonna fake that a little bit. But to be able to create a little bit of the illusion of depth with regards to using some of the variations. And then as we go into the foreground here, variety of darks and lighters. I'm not going to mark the whole way down where I haven't carved because I'm going to have to transfer those marks anyhow. And I can already see on some of the glacial scratches, it's going to need a little bit of extra work, but it's the beginning of what you'll see. Now, again, look, we don't press this onto the paper. We press the paper onto the, one can wet the paper also. I've tried that. Sometimes I'm not going to do that now, but so here we have the the element placed on the board. This board helps with that too. And then I'm going to lay the paper smooth side down, watercolor paper tight against here for a registration. And then I'm going to, the other thing is a brayer. I think this is a batten. I'm not positive about what it's exactly what it's called, but we're pressing the paper into the ink. So we're striving for good coverage across the paper, good transfer of ink. Sometimes you can get a second printing, although it's pretty ghosty looking. I'm going to slide this just down slightly so that I can get into this corner, although I don't think that the mountain goes the whole way up there. And you might see a little bit of the scratches of the sky coming through. That's the nature of the wood block. Not as much this, but so we're going to take this off slowly, and then you can see, I can get just a still image here of the inking and the process going on here. So we got the bray, the battening. Okay, now we're sliding the image up. So we've got the big reveal here going on. And we see it's a little chunky in this area, but again, remember, I've not removed much of the paper there. Here is where I had wiped off that area. Now remember that where all that white, now I'm happy that there's not much in the sky. Now I purposely did not ink the sky. But remember that this is going to be printed on top of the color that I already have. So that is going to be, there's going to be some depth. So this is going to be printed onto this. So you'll have some of the brown underneath this area. You'll have the sky in the background. I'm going to spend some more time carving out that. But you can see it does create that illusion of the scratches, which I really liked a lot. But I wanted to show you another thing, which is that is one block, but I did spend some time already on this. I am going to ink onto both a white block, but then also onto a piece that already has layers, so you can see what goes on. So this is based on a collage that I had done a few weeks ago, and here's that collage just so you can kind of peek at it. That is why I'm going to be mixing the red and the I want to get some violet in there into some of the, and we're going to continue just with the same brayers because this can be, well, we're inking the mountain here. We're going to be inking the blue. I might do the mountain first. Well, the blue first. The blue is really going to take some time here and here. So I probably want to take a little bit of time in terms of the putting that down. The ink dries. It actually does dry fairly quickly, believe it or not. I've been really surprised. Not as easy to make the violet as I had hoped, but and it probably does not help that I had some grayish in there. I feel like I'm getting a little bit of violet, could be a little bit lighter. There, I feel like that's getting more approximate to what I had wanted. So I'm going to be doing that more. I'm going to be a little fast here to wrap up for the last. I'm going to run slightly over in the recording, so if you can stay, that's good because I started a little bit late. My apologies. I really want to I want to see what this is going to look like, both on the regular paper and then on the area that I had printed previously. So we've got that going on a little bit more than I normally would get on there, but maybe we'll do a second printing out of that. And then we're going to keep that brayer clean by going to another brayer for the grays of the mountain here. I want to get a little bit more black. This is really where it starts coming into what does an artist do in terms of the why my block print process is going to be different than some other people's block printing. So we've got some applied paint, as it were, ink, etc. I want to keep the black separate from the water. A little bit challenging. Normally, this would be multiple blocks, but I was a little bit tight on time and did not want to have to wait for all of the ink to dry from one to the other to the other. And I wanted you to be able to see what's going on. So we've got that going on. And then for some of the rock areas here, we get this inked fairly quickly here, not keeping people too long if they are checking in. The recording is just going to keep recording as far as I can tell, which is great. So I'm not losing that. So we've got that as we're going to print that onto the white paper first. See what that looks like. Then we'll ink it up a little bit more. Move that onto the top here, the register. Layer this on top. Really batten the heck out of it. Get that to transfer onto. And then I'm going to transfer this. You will see this onto a finished print that has multiple layers that we can see what that looks like. You'll see both what a black and white print, black, white, and purple and gray, but then what it's going to look like when it's printed onto the other layers. This is probably one of the most important steps to really press down into it. Now it's probably a little bit gummy because of how much ink I have on some of the aspects of it, but we're still going to see what's going on. Pretty happy with what that's looking like. It looks like a mountain, looks like something water-wise. But what we're going to do next here, which will be more special, I'll say, we're going to transfer that onto this paper, which has been already inked with some of the other areas. And so I'm going to look at my paper here and think, okay, I think I'm okay with what the mountain looks like. Maybe spend a little bit more time on the mountain, but I feel like some of this area here needs a little bit more inking. Frankly, even some of the mountain, maybe. These bottom parts did not come through, and I don't remember really what happened with that, but I feel like that probably needs a little bit more ink. Now it's really starting to dry out a little bit onto this. I'm gonna have to spend some time cleaning this up afterwards. I'm gonna glance at the print. So this had dried out just a little bit. The extender would be a good idea to do. Probably not using the extender as much as I should. I'm under pressure here. I want to make sure that folks can see what's going on. I'm going to try transferring that onto the paper then. So this, normally I would not do this, but because I've made registration marks on there, I need to be able to see what's happening on the paper before I flip it over to transfer it. So that's what I'm doing here. So now we're going to transfer that over. Again, not what I would normally do. I got a little bit of black there. It's okay, that's the back of it. We're going to see how close the mountain got to being onto. I want to just see how I could have used more ink. Cheating just a little bit. I'm going to try to get some extender onto here. What is the extender? The extender is adding water would also do the same type of thing, but I don't want to introduce water in at this point into this whole mess. But mixing that, here's the extender. So it's just clear. Draw a little bit of that. It's going to just ease it up a little bit more. I don't mind if the top of the mountain is lighter, but I don't want, what's the water looking like? The water is looking really, really weak. So that needs an extender too. Sorry to be running over time here a little bit. I'm getting a little bit of color in the rocks, which is fine. And I've got to wipe off a little bit. I've got gray on an area that I wanted to get the violet, which I normally have water. We're just going to use a little bit of thinner because at least it's wet. Gotta get that. Yeah, I think that will be a little bit more successful. I had added a bit more water to my plate when I was doing all the rest of this inking, and I'm realizing that would have been a better thing to do. I don't mind some of the dryness because the details show up better, but and I probably should be pressing just a titch more, probably. There is a difference between the watercolor paper and the and regular printing. Printing paper has less texture, so there'd be less of the white paper showing through, but it's a learning process. I realize just need a little bit more water when I'm doing the watercolor paper for this. Now, before it gets too tacky, let's see how that looks. Okay, mostly happy with what that's looking like. Gonna take a little bit of extra care. Okay, that's not too bad, except for the slight amount into the sky, which I really did not want to have. Let me see if I can quickly lift up some of that. Not the easiest thing to do. but it's not bad. So after the recording, we'll clean that up a little bit, and I'll post it in a couple days. So have a good day, everyone. Bye bye.